just don't want to suffer at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah.
um, the Holy Father restricts the Mass. I can't go to the Mass I love. It's harder to raise my family in the faith. I just don't want to suffer at the end of the day. So it is kind of resistance against suffering. But if I think about the kingdom and where we're going and hope in the future of the church, then you can suffer for almost anything.
That's so true. That is so true. And that message, I think, is what's lacking for the average person. And they may feel like, well, this isn't fair, or it's not what I like. And I can understand that, because we all feel those feelings from time to time, and for good reason. But that's ultimately not what it's not what matters, and it's not the measure of what we should do, because suffering will come. Jesus said, in the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. So there's the sense of joy. That doesn't mean you have to be, that you have to ignore problems. I mean, we have real problems in the church, serious, real problems. The church always seems to have those problems of one sort or another. But fear of suffering is a great deterrent. And it's easy to blame other people. Rather than suffer, I'll complain about him or her or this or that. And in a way that sort of ties back into what I was saying earlier, that young family raising kids want their children to have the faith. Been there, done that. I know exactly what that feeling is like. And I just did the best I could, Nancy and I, the two of us, which is you just do what you need to do. So if it means finding a better parish, a more traditional parish, and go there, do that. And then I think it helps to diminish the temptation to be angry. You find a good place and go there. And then be patient. Be patient. The church is going through a long convulsion right now. And it started before Vatican II. There were many things leading up to Vatican II that were sort of look at Pius X and the syllabus of errors. So many of the things that we're seeing in the world today are written 120 years ago in the syllabus of errors, and even before that, in some of the papal warnings about things that were coming.
Where he talks about modernism?
Yeah, modernism, for sure, modernism. Even 250 years ago, Americanism, the heresy of Americanism, which nobody even knows about anymore. Yeah, look it up. It's good. Or call my show and I'll tell you.
What is the heresy of Americanism?
The heresy of Americanism would be more or less the opposite of ultramontanism, which is where, or let's just say ultramontanism, where the church in America was feeling as if it was unique unto itself and didn't really need oversight from the Pope or from the magisterium, because Americans had it all figured out. And this was the land of manifest destiny. And therefore the church had its own autonomy to do what it wanted. Now, I don't know how many Catholics per se felt that way, but there were prelates in the Catholic Church who acted that way. And so the Pope had to rein them in. But I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
What were we talking about?
The syllabus of errors? Oh, yeah.
Problems before Vatican II.
Yeah.
So
we're living in an era, a kind of a convulsing of the church. I have a thought on that. If you want, I could share that. Okay. So to situate Vatican II within the cultural and historical context, we have to take stock of the fact that just leading up to Vatican II and even during Vatican II, the world was going through, especially Western society, was going through a tremendous upheaval. So we had been living with the Cold War. We'd come out of World War II, living with the Cold War, communism as a menace. There was then the scientific revolution in terms of mass media. Suddenly now there's this proliferation of information on television. We had radio before that. The rise of the sexual revolution, the mass marketing of contraception in the form of pills and condoms that didn't really exist before that. You had to look really hard to be able to find those things. The rise of pornography as a massive presence in our society. Political assassinations. So John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, and all the other things, the Vietnam War, the peace protests, the sit-ins, the race riots, all these things were happening all at once. And in the middle of all that, the church has Vatican II. And so my sense of it is that a lot of the angst and dissatisfaction and even anger were a reaction to things that were happening in the church, but within the bigger picture of all these other things that were happening that were greatly antagonizing people. The people who didn't like those things, they were antagonized. And my sense of it is that their religious devotion and their political affiliations, especially if they were conservative, and even just not wanting to be killed or harmed, these things sort of amalgamated together in a kind of generalized resistance to change and upheaval. And so in the case of the church, a lot of these emotional external things, politics, society, drugs, sexual revolution, things like that, it helped to fuel or reinforce this sense of resistance to the things that were changing. And the only other thing I would say is that the way that Vatican II is implemented liturgically and in other ways as well, in many ways, the problems resulted not so much from what was being said, but how there was no catechesis. The people were not being told, here's why the church thinks we should do this. And so they're left thinking, well, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Why are suddenly now we're not doing or saying or praying the way that we once did? And in the absence of any kind of adequate explanation, many people fell away. Some people became radicalized. Some people just sort of merged into a bland kind of conformist Catholicism that lacked any kind of depth or real knowledge. And I saw it happen. I saw it as it happened. And in many ways, I sometimes think, Lord, why was my faith left intact when so many other people of my generation lost their faith? And I don't know the answer to that, except that God is kind and God is merciful. But I think those things figure in as well into the reaction to the new Mass.